Great.
This is a protest against COVID-19 because COVID-19 is nothing but a big cover for communist rule hitting the shores of the West.
You know what? Brilliant, Candice. It was developed in a lab. They all have little Mao Zedong hats on. They all have little Chinese flags. They're all coming on and submarines to hit the shores and bring communism. Bring communism. That's the goal of COVID-19. Because we all know, in like the 3rd chapter of Das Kapital, it says, when every American has to stand 6 feet apart and wear a mask, communism will have been achieved. So, next we're going to talk about Candice Owens. So Candice Owens is a very interesting individual. She is complaining about COVID and complaining about rules and things that people have said about COVID. But specifically, she accuses COVID, as in the disease, the sickness, the virus, of being a big cover for communist rule hitting the shores of the United States of America. And I'm very interested to see that argumentation.
We obviously know the reason that they're running point on this is because they don't want Americans to connect the dots. Because we're at the beginning of this horror show, right? At the beginning where they come and they say it's going to be great. Everyone, we're going to band together. We're going to take from the rich people and you're going to have more. And they are in Cuba at the end of this nightmare and realizing that actually, no, it was just their government growing themselves, empowering themselves, and removing power from the people.
The thing is, nobody can tell me that the Cuban dual currency system, right, which was done away with, is connected to Medicare for all. Or is somebody going to really tell me that the healthcare systems that we are moving forward to or advocating for, or the lowering of the Medicare eligibility rate is communism? Communism has to do with the workers owning the means of production. This has nothing to do with that. You look at Denmark, look at Great Britain, you look at France, look at Germany, you look at Sweden. You look at a lot of places in the world, and these larger social programs did not bring about authoritarian rule where the government's got you by the throat and they're going to throw you away because you didn't salute Mao Zedong walking down the street.
Occurred is occurred.
So no, we're not at the start of this big journey towards Fidel Castro's paradise. No, we're not. The last time I checked, we do not have Batista in power, which was a US-backed dictator, by the way, which is going to get overthrown.
These people are starving and they're in the streets. And I want to get to actually Twitter, because this shocked me when I saw the banner. Everybody in the world knows this is about them protesting against communism.
What? No. Okay. There are people who want to, in Cuba, who want to do away with communism and socialism. That is true. There are also people in there who are open communists and socialists protesting against the government due to their terrible, 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 terrible COVID response. And they're doing that, their terrible COVID response getting compounded by the abolishment of the dual currency system, which was supposed to help, control inflation and stuff like that. The COVID response compounded by the dual inflation, the dual currency system getting done away with. Then you add the authoritarian nature of the government, which it is authoritarian, that's for sure, has led to a lot of protests and a lot of different coalitions forming to protest against the government. But to make such a blanket statement is inaccurate. You can criticize communism, you can criticize Cuba's economic model, but you can't look me in the eye and seriously say that everybody out there wants to do away with Fidel. Because a lot of people on the streets actually respect Fidel. Now, you don't personally need to acknowledge that, right? But that's the truth.
And look at Twitter's headline. The protests take place across Cuba as country faces shortages of COVID-19 vaccines. This is a protest about COVID. You know what? I'm going to agree with them.
Great.
This is a protest against COVID-19 because COVID-19 is nothing but a big cover for communist rule hitting the shores of the West.
You know what? Brilliant, Candice. It was developed in a lab. was developed in a lab. They all have little Mao Zedong hats on. They all have little Chinese flags. They're all coming on and in submarines to hit the shores and bring communism. Bring communism. That's the goal of COVID-19. Because we all know, in like the 3rd chapter of Das Kapital, it says, when every American has to stand 6 feet apart and wear a mask, communism will have been achieved. When every American is offered a vaccination to deal with new disease, that is when communism has been achieved. That's actually the About the Author section of Das Kapital. I'm sure most of you haven't read it.
You are masking our children. You are pretending it's because of COVID-19.
What does masking children or masking anybody have to do with communism? Taiwan and Japan have had long traditions of people just wearing masks when they're sick. Are you going to tell me Taiwan's communist? Japan is communist? Please.
You are radically changing the way that we vote in this country. You're pretending.
Giving people more access to the vote and changing the vote is not communism. Well, unless you're one of those, maybe if you're one of these people, right? Maybe if you're one of, maybe if you're this guy, right? Well, if you're one of these guys, maybe you think that more access to voting booths is communism, right? The same way, I guess maybe you would say race mixing is communism. But if you're not one of these people in the 1960s, then more access to the polls shouldn't be communism, as far as I'm aware. Don't understand. Don't understand. What is communistic about more access to the polls or changing voting laws? We changed a lot of voting laws in the 1960s. We did. We changed a lot of voting laws in the 1960s. In fact, we changed voting laws in the 1920s. We gave women the right to vote. Did either of those events cause communism? Did communism come to the shores in the United States when we gave women the right to vote? When we expanded voting rights in the 1960s with the Voting Rights Act? Did Lyndon B. Johnson bring about communism in the United States, even though he was the presidency that also, had the Gulf of Tonkin incident and started the long war in Vietnam, which was fighting against domino theory? What is communism, Candice?
Because of COVID-19. All of this stuff is actually the democratic socialists, aka the communists, coming
Okay, words mean nothing, I understand.
together to bring communism to the American shore.
Absolutely.
So, absolutely. I love the... Candice, you got it right on the money. I was thinking that all day. I'm happy someone had the right to say it. And finally, I'm happy somebody said it. Brilliant. Brilliant. How would this work? Out of all the things to bring communism to the United States, we choose a disease that is supposed to stop people from going out and gathering in large public gatherings? And that's what would bring... If we were trying to use COVID to bring communism, why would we choose a disease that is specifically like anti-large groups of people gathering? I don't know if you know about the revolution of 1917, but there was a lot of large groups of people gathering.
And it's exactly what they did before they consolidated power and Fidel finally admitted he was a communist. In fact,
What? Fidel Castro had everybody like sing a song about washing their hands, putting on masks, and staying 6 feet apart. That's brilliant. I've never heard about that. That is a new development in my Cuban history. That is a new development of my knowledge of Cuban history.
You look at their propaganda they put out back then, you could interchange that with the actual materials from Democratic candidates today. We're not communist, we're humanist, we're pro-justice for all, we want health.
We're not communists, we're humanist. Pro-justice. Look, this guy's making communism sound like it's the bee's knees. I mean, if communism is like humanism, respecting human beings and believing it with justice and fairness, that's communism. Why is he making it sound so good?
Healthcare for all, we want education for all. They wanted indoctrination in schools for all. They wanted division of race for all. They wanted to go door to door.
Oh my God, the door-to-door vaccines. You know what? It's a really interesting theory. The whole thing about door-to-door vaccines. The idea that door-to-door vaccines is communism. I mean, the government having information about you, about like where you live, and to the fact where they could go to your door. I mean, that's communism, man. That's communism. I could never think of a government body that could like have knowledge about where you live so they can go door to door to give you. That is a terrifying concept. And I'm sure that whenever it happens, it will be a sad day in the United States of America. Whenever that happens. Door-to-door vaccines. Brilliant. Candice Owens once again showing us why she is the most intelligent conservative on the planet. Brilliant.